All right, folks, welcome back to the Green Pill Podcast, where we focus on making health simple for you, but more importantly, for your family, loved ones, and community. Today's guest is Dr. Valéry Fradkov, and today you're going to hear his systems for emotional communication. What are emotions? Why do people get mixed up in their relationships at work, etc.? Very, very intuitive and novel ideas that have really changed my life. Valéry's been a mentor to me, a family friend since I was a teenager. You'll hear a couple anecdotes on that. I really can't do it justice enough. This is going to really open your mind, this conversation. So without further ado, here's Valéry Fradkov on Green Pill. Honestly, I know when I ask you, Valéry, you don't see it as intrinsically different, but most people would see the transition from physics to finance to therapy as so disparate. Why don't you see it as different?
No, transition from physics to finance was not at all a transition, because what I was doing was still mathematical modeling of some processes, which were not physical processes, but it was still very similar. However, when the switch to psychology happened due to some provocative accident, I would say. I had a very good friend of mine. Unfortunately, he is not with us anymore, Mark Golenko. Once just gave me a diagnostic and statistical manual, DSM-4, and said, look through this book, you might find something interesting in it. The book is full of symptoms of different psychiatric and psychological disorders. When I opened it and started to read, I couldn't stop until I ended. The book is that thick. I just found a new world where there's so much empirical data and so much interesting phenomena, and virtually very little understanding of why it happens, how it happens, and how to deal with it, because there are no models. Physicists don't study nature as many people think. All scientists study nature. Specifics of physics is that physics studies simplified model of nature. And that's my way of thinking. So I started to think about psychology and psychiatry. How can I build a simplified model so that I can understand what is important for this phenomenon, what is not, and how I can deal with that? And it took about 20 years to come to where I am now. But I believe that now I have a very original, maybe, approach to people's functioning, people's psychological functioning, which is based mainly on my experience in physics and computer science, and of course, a lot of reading and clinical experience in psychology.
And so you take a problem that you're facing, whether it be with electrons, bonds, or people, and you try to figure out what's going on, eliminate the stuff that's irrelevant, make a model for how that person's world works or that physical phenomena works. And then once you know the pieces of the model, then you can help a person or otherwise shift those pieces to produce a different result.
And sometimes I can do it with such precision that it surprises even me. I can just give you one example in my clinical vignette, if you want. I worked with a woman. It was an interesting story. She had a husband and two daughters, and there was a very good family. The relationship was very close, and everybody was pretty happy. One day, husband started coughing, and the cough is hard, so he was prescribed one of those syrups with codeine. And it worked. Then she started coughing, and she also tried this syrup, which was left over from her husband. It also worked. And very soon the cough was gone, but the syrup stayed. She got addicted to codeine. Being a nurse, she was stealing prescription stationaries from her doctor and prescribed herself this syrup. For 6 months, she was doing it until she was caught. And when she got caught, of course, her career was in jeopardy. She had legal issues. All that was reasonably benign as compared to the reaction of her husband. Her husband was so angry with her. He was telling her that she stabbed him in the back, that he cannot be with her. It was terrifying. And she was trying to apologize all the way she knew, but it didn't work.
So
So
what
that was
happened?
her major
Go ahead.
issue. And when I was presented with this issue, my first question was, what is going on? The husband is angry. My modeling of emotions tells me that there is only one situation when people get angry, when they perceive a reality as if somebody is trying to diminish this, to belittle them, to not show enough respect, belittle them, deprive them from their social status. Then people, if they feel strong enough, they would fight back. They would show that they are stronger than that. You can't do it to me. I'm too strong for that. And that is usually expressed through aggression. That's the show of strength. So we call it aggression. And we usually associate it with anger. So I started to think, what could trigger him? What could make him think that she deprives him from his status? And then try to imagine what is going on. He is, well, in a way, the head of the family. He had his own business. Most of the money in the family is generated through his business. He takes care of his daughter, of his wife. Apparently, I would, if I were in his shoes, my self-image would be that I'm a protector. I need to protect this family. I need to protect my girls and make sure that they're happy and not in trouble. And now I find out that for 6 months, my wife was in trouble and they didn't know about that. I couldn't fulfill my function. That might be what triggered his anger, I thought. That really, yeah, he was deprived from his rights as a leader, as a protector. So I gave her advice. I tell her, next time you see him and you are talking, he's not shouting at you. You can tell him something. Tell him one thing. Tell him that if I can turn time back and change one thing in all his story, that would be I would tell you from the very beginning. And she was very surprised. She couldn't understand how it is relevant to anything. So I actually had to write this sentence on a piece of paper and gave it to her to learn by heart. Next week she came and said, Doctor, I don't know what your magic is, but when I said him this stupid and irrelevant sentence, he started to cry, he gave me a hug, and we're back together.
Oh my God. And so
that's how precise this technique is. It's really more, looks more like physics or some other type of hard science than fuzzy psychology.
And for those listening, I think like making health simple is why you're listening to this. And I think if you can make emotions simple, if you can make communication simple, that's probably 80% of your problems of anyone listening out there. I mean, of course, there's things that happen to us that we can't control, health and life and otherwise. But if you can communicate even a little bit better, and if you have a stuck situation like that, keep listening, because there's a bunch more coming down the pipe, and we're going to get both the theory of emotion, the structure, the intellectual structure from Valéry, but also anecdotes and vignettes like this. And so it was almost surgical, because you perceived that there was a power imbalance. There was, a person thought they had power, that power was taken away from them. Therefore, they demonstrated anger to make sure it never happened again. Because if we think about emotions as forward looking, the anger is, well, I'm so angry, if I'm going to hurt you if you do this again. And so you found what took his power away, and ultimately it was a lack of respect for his self-perceived status. And maybe folks listening say, well, why is he the patriarch? Why does he control everything? But the fact is, that's how he saw himself. And so when his wife, who he's supposed to protect, didn't give him the chance to fulfill his role, he didn't know who he was in the world. And so that's a pretty, the ambiguity is a pretty scary place to be. So when she went back and acknowledged that, hey, I took your power away and I wouldn't do it again, he felt heard. And that's why he started crying, and he felt understood. And that's what broke the logjam.
That's also a perfect example of how imprecise communication through emotions, nonverbal communication is. There are only so many different ways to behave, and there are many words in the world.
Can you touch on that exactly? Like, what ways are there to behave non-verbally?
There are quite a few angry behaviors as one of them, aggression, but there are also sadness. All expressions of emotions are actually ways to communicate, but there are so few of them as compared to hundreds of thousands of words we can use. So no wonder that verbal communication may be much more precise. To interpret emotions, you need to analyze the context. There was an interesting experiment once. People were shown a photograph of a woman with some facial expression and asked what emotion is there. Most people said it was anger. But then they were shown the whole picture, not just the face. And the whole picture was of an Olympic athlete finishing first and being triumphant about that. So it was actually a triumph, not anger on her face. But you can only see it if you have enough context. So when we try to interpret other people's emotional messages, we should analyze the context, and some people do it better, some worse. We actually need it when we try to understand what people say in words, but still it's much more precise and much less context dependent than nonverbal communication, which is all based on the context. And being able to understand what other people feel or express, which feelings people express, is an art. Some people do it better, some people do it worse. I call this talent empathic ability, because empathy is usually associated with some good feelings or good intentions toward the person. But empathic ability is just an ability to understand what other people feel.
And so when you're talking about your theory of emotion, there's both nonverbal communication and there's verbal, and underlying either of those communications are one of maybe 5 key emotions, and one would be anger, fear.
I don't think that we can say it's only 5. There are many messages we express, and there are many emotions, and some of them are expressed similarly, and we need context to discern. And but there are many messages in the society. Let's look at, and this is my way. My way is that I define emotions as a nonverbal communication tool. And then immediately there is a very interesting consequence from that. Since we as a species learn to speak much, much later than we learned to feel, our emotional expressions is what makes people, it's not what we say makes people feel one way or another. It's how we say it. The same message delivered differently might evoke totally different emotions from people, from anger to happiness. I remember I first encountered that, I first thought about that way back in Russia when I worked for an academic institute, and I had a friend, also a physicist, who had some issues with KGB. And KGB ordered our director to fire him, and there is no way around it. So when he was invited to the director's office, we knew what it was about, so I came with him just to support him morally. And I was sitting waiting in the lobby, and he spent about 20 minutes in the office. And when he came out, he was smiling ear to ear. And I asked Mark, he didn't fire you? And Mark said, he did, but how? Really, what we feel doesn't depend. You can send almost any message, but if you send it in the right way, you can evoke different feelings. You can evoke anger, or you can evoke sadness, or you can evoke something much, much less negative. That's important. If you show people respect, if you show people, if you tell them what your message is not, because many people expect something, and our perception is very tricky. We not only see and hear what we see and hear what is there, but also what we expect to see and hear. There's a combination of the reality and our expectations. So you have to correct for people's expectations. Another thing is that when the situation is ambiguous, people usually choose the worst possible interpretation. It's for a good reason. The cost of the error is big. Like in this classic example, you walk in the jungles and then you hear some noise in the bush and you don't know, maybe it's a bird or maybe it's a tiger.
Mm-hmm.
If you decide that it was a tiger but it was just a bird and you ran away, at least you survive. But
Mm-hmm.
if you decide that it was a bird and it was a tiger, you can be killed. So the cost of error is so high that you prefer to be prepared to the worst scenario rather than the best scenario. And that's what we always intuitively do, because that's how evolution formed us to survive. In social interactions, sometimes it's not the best way to approach situations, but it's in any case, it's my responsibility to let you know that I'm not attacking you. If to take away all this ambiguity, if I tell you what to do, you can consider it a request or an order. And if you think that it's an order, you will get angry, because who am I to give you orders? So I need to make sure that you know that it was not an order, that it was a respect, that it was a request. Or another example, well, we decided to go, I don't know, to the movies tonight. And at the last moment, I call you and say, Alex, I changed my mind, we're not going.
Mm-hmm.
There are only two ways you can react to this situation. You can be either angry, who is he to do it to me? How could he make this unilateral decisions for both of us? Or you can feel guilty and walk in circles and think, what did I do so that he's so angry with me that he does it to me?
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how strong you feel about yourself, how you estimate your own strengths as compared to mine. If you feel strong, you will feel angry. If you feel weak, you will feel guilty. But that's only two possible reactions. At the same time, if I call you, say, Alex, I'm sorry, something happened, could I have a rain check? I am giving you exactly the same message. We are not going to the movies tonight. But the feelings I evoke are totally different. And if you're tuned to these nuances, I would say, your communication becomes much more successful.
And it's those nuances that you taught me, and I learned from you and practiced when I was going through tough times, that really unlocked a lot of things for me. And you know, I know you tell this story, which I like, about when you were in the lab as a PhD student in Russia, and I think you were so bored in your classes that you wanted to do something more interesting with a senior professor. And I guess you came to him and you said, "Hey, do you take any interns?" And somehow you got the internship. So how did that happen?
I was not just bored, I was terrified. I go to this school where I was supposed to sit on my bottom for 6 years almost to get my bachelor and master combination, and listen to the lectures and do some, and it was just terrifying for me, because I just can't do that. I needed to do something meaningful, and I know that I learn much better when I work than when I just study. So I found a professor I liked. I came to him and I told him exactly what I told you, that I'm terrified of sitting through the lectures and seminars for 6 years instead of doing something meaningful. And I want to work with somebody. I don't care what to do, but I care very much with whom to do it. And I liked him very much. I wanted to work with him. And his answer was very, very, very interesting. He said, Valéry, first, we usually don't take students before the third year. I was on my first year. I was a freshman. Second, this year we were not. I didn't have any intention to take any additional students. And third, all this is not relevant to you. Can you start tomorrow? That's how I got my first job.
And you know, I've used that kind of technique so successfully since. I mean, I think the context there was you could have gone another way and said, "Hi, Dr. Smith, are you taking interns this year? I'm interested." No, right? "Hi, Dr. Smith, do you take interns below junior year?" No. But instead you came and you said, I'm having this problem. I'm really scared. I need help. And I don't really care what I do. I just want to work with some cool people. So the context there is, maybe a bit of flattery, but also you really needed help and you were lost. And you left him the power to decide your future instead of reminding him of the rules that he'd be breaking to help you. And I think so many folks out there that I've coached, and I know that my friends and me, and we always default to this rule system, which is made by humans. And it goes for partner relationships, it goes for boss-employee relationships, it goes for friend relationships. You default to what you think you should do. But often if you just ask, a lot will come. So I guess in your practice, you work with both people you see as clients, people you see as relatively stable and functioning adults in society who feel good in their, mostly feel good in their family lives, professional lives, health. And then you work with patients, people who are really experiencing a deviation from feeling good, some deviation from the norm. And I know you've told me you kind of under-pathologize folks, generally speaking. I mean, in the case of the woman with her husband, the codeine, it was such a quick, precise, insert, like almost a CRISPR genetics change. How do you help folks who are really mired deeply in really tough situations? And I ask because a lot of folks out there have parents, of my age, who have parents they're either substance abuse disorders, they are driving themselves into the grave through whether it be lifestyle behavior, food, not sleeping. They're addicted to Fox News or MSNBC. They're driving themselves nuts. They're glued to the couch. I mean, I've talked to tons of friends who have family who are not doing well and they have no idea what to do about it. And as you know, like one of the main reasons I did this podcast is because my mom was schizophrenic growing my whole life. And even when I moved away and was living with my dad, she got cancer and I couldn't do much. She passed away. And I always thought that, not that I could cure someone who was schizophrenic, especially as a child, but I had so much therapy, so much support. I was privileged in many ways to get through what was a really tough childhood in some respects. And as an adult, I have family and extended family who are not the healthiest. And I just say to myself, well, I don't want to see you get sick. I already lost my mom. You can change. There's a future for you. You can stop this process of driving yourself into a hole. And so if we can figure out some simple communication styles around health, then we can meaningfully change people's lives and really those of our families, most importantly. So for example, I have someone close to me who was on their way to being diabetic, and they weren't fully taking care of themselves. They were okay. And I wrote them a 20-page letter, and I wrote them examples of why all the people around them were not super healthy, not taking care of themselves. That doesn't mean that they have to do that. And I told them the consequences of having diabetes. And I told them how simple it would be to sleep a little more, move more, change the diet, and how measurably it would change their lives and my life if they did that. That article got published by Whoop, the wearable company. I'll link it in the show notes. So coming back to you and your practice, I mean, when you have somebody facing a tough parent or a tough case themselves, how do you get in there with what seems simple?
It looks simple, right? You see that the person have problems. You as a health coach, see those people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And from experience that just telling them you don't do things right, your lifestyle is terrible, you need to change, would probably just anger them.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a number of reasons for that. Who are you to tell them what to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, when you offer help, what you're saying is you cannot do it yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
many people don't appreciate the message.
Mm-hmm.
So offering help takes a lot of tactfulness. You need to, the best way is when people ask you for help. If they don't ask you for help, offering him help or just starting to help him can be insulting, which is, of course, counterintuitive, but that's how it is. Many people suffer from not understanding that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, when people live a non-healthy lifestyle, or even get addicted to something. And you can get addicted to almost anything, not necessarily chemical substances. So the nature of addiction is not chemical, it's psychological. The people usually do it for a reason. There is some goal they try to achieve. For example, if you perceive your life like you are deprived from all decision-making power, everything is decided for you in school by your teachers, at home by your mother, or whatever the situation. It may not even be true. You might have the powers, but you perceive yourself as powerless. That's a terrible feeling. Apparently, our social connections, our need to belong, our need to be accepted is stronger than hunger and pain. So that's how social humans are. So you will try to do something about it. And if you cannot evoke any changes in reality, you might try to build a world for yourself where you can escape and where you have power. For example, you decide everything for me, but nobody can force me to eat, and you have an anorexic. Or nobody can force me to stop eating, and then you have a binge eating disorder. Or nobody can stop me from drinking, and then you have. So when you tell people you should not do that, all they hear is another attempt to coerce you and control you. And
Context,
they
right?
and yes, and they rebel. So in a way, most of those behaviors is an unhealthy way to rebel against the world who takes their powers away, who doesn't show you enough respect. And respect is actually, in my definition, respect is allowing people to make their own decisions. And it's mutual respect. There is also respect to authority, which is a slightly different thing, or maybe significantly different thing. And about respect, I usually sometimes when I need to make this point about importance of showing respect, I tell people that I came from Russia, and in Russia it's traditional to drink a lot. Well, I was not a drinker. I had a lot of problems with that because people didn't understand. If you don't drink, you probably don't respect us or something like that. But what I'm trying to say is that when people get really drunk and their brain is not able to process information efficiently, their communications reduce to something very basic and very, very simple and very important. The most important thing, they don't talk about anything which is not fundamentally important. And all those conversations typically look the same. One guy says to the other, "Vasya, do you respect me?" And the other one says, "Yes, I do." "And do you respect me?" "Yes, I do." "Okay, let's drink some more." Even as in any joke, like there's only part of joke here, that's really the most fundamental thing. And if the question of Vasya, do you respect me is not resolved, no other communication is possible at all.
And you see that with mother, daughter, father, son.
Or you
see it at work, boss. You see it in husband, wife.
Yeah. So that's when nonverbal communication comes to play, because you usually don't show respect through words. You don't say, "I respect you," only if you're really drunk.
Right.
Usually you show it through some other
body language, nodding your head, eye contact,
nodding your head, showing the deference,
shaking hands, right?
Shaking hands in a
Small
specific
talk.
way, yeah. Small talk is a especially interesting thing. Small talk is a good example of nonverbal communication pretending to be verbal. Because when people engage in small talk, they don't exchange any information. They talk about what everybody knows anyway, or nobody is interested, or like the weather, yeah, cars, or even sports. Yeah, it's not a real exchange of information. But there is a lot of information exchanged non-verbally.
Tonality, right?
You know, when two dogs meet, they usually sniff each other's butts before they start communicating and playing together, right? That sniffing is an analog of our small talk. We just need to figure out what people around are feeling toward us, what they are, what the status is. If you already know the person, you need to know to get a confirmation that we're still good, right? Myriads of questions are resolved through small talk. and nonverbal communication in general.
With small talk specifically, which is, nonverbal in the sense that it's talking about something that's not risky at all. We all know it's boring. It's not interesting. So sports, I love sports, but still we all know what happened in the game last night. So why are we talking about it? Especially not analyzing it. We're just saying, oh, did you see that? Yeah, I saw that. Or no, I didn't see that. It's the tonality, right? It's, are we still good? Because if I come to you and say, hey, crazy day outside, right? This rain is nuts. And you just stare at me. Well,
Exactly.
now I'm getting, so wait a
What
minute.
can we do?
Well, if you're just staring at me, either you're angry at me, you're gone deaf all of a sudden, you're so preoccupied with something that you can't even respond to me. So it's a check, or if I go to shake your hand and you hug me, well, we misunderstood what level we're on, but that could be okay. I actually had another podcast guest who I won't share, but we had an awesome coffee. And at the end of the coffee, we were talking about different financial models, industries, really connecting. At the end of the coffee, we go to shake each other's hand, and the handshake is like this. It was the worst handshake I've ever had. It was such an awkward feeling. And I can't place why it was so awkward. I mean, we weren't on the same page, and we never spoke again until I emailed him to be on the podcast. And I said, hey, it's me. Remember that awkward handshake we had? I still think we had a great conversation. I'd love to talk to you. He came on. So, it's interesting. And, I had another conversation yesterday. We were negotiating some business deal I want to get involved in. And it's a guy who I'm friends with, but then we work with. So the first 7-10 minutes of the conversation was all about, do you want to rent the house from me? Are you going to have kids? Oh, how is it to have kids in Miami? How is it? And we were talking about those subjects, but I think what was actually happening non-verbally was we were establishing that we had a friendship. And then on top of the friendship, oh yeah, we can build maybe some business, ideas from there. And so it's the same. I was just in Tanzania and, I was visiting the Hadza tribe and, I was visiting all kinds of people I didn't know with different customs than mine. And they also have their own version of small talk and hello and goodbye and all these words that like in Swahili, you say this word like mambo. It's like, how are you? And the person responds, poa. And I started experimenting and just saying it when I met someone. And the response of poa was so instant, it was almost nonverbal. And it worked sometimes, even when someone was trying to sell me something I didn't want, when somebody was trying to rip me off in negotiation. I said, mambo, I said, poa. And things changed, like it was an acknowledgement that I'm a human, you're a human, I know your language. They saw me as one of them versus an outsider. And actually, maybe you can touch on like group dynamics a little bit, because we've done some personal dynamics of, position and hierarchy and context when communicating. And when those things are ignored, you see what happens.
Group communication style. There are two aspects of it, between the groups and within a group. And if you're talking about small talk, I remember I once was on one of those parties when people stand with their plates in their hands and talk to each other, walk around. And there was some little group of people, they were all talking. It was typical small talk. And then when we were leaving, I heard like one of the women who was in this group told to her husband, this guy is such a smart man. And I was like, he didn't say anything to show that he was smart. It was just the way he was talking, the way he was presenting himself. Nothing in this conversation.
Nothing else, right?
Absolutely. But that was enough of those nonverbal cues for her to decide that he was a smart guy. This is what group dynamics is actually based upon, those nonverbal cues. When we have groups, there are messages within the group. And messages within a group are reasonably simple. One of important messages is what I call patriotic message. I am one of us. I am one of us is an important message. If you have other groups, if you have only one group, it's irrelevant. But if you have other groups, it's one of the most important messages. It's like friend-foe signaling in the military. What I mean is that you need to send the message, I'm one of us. And you send it through lots of nonverbal cues, like we're wearing similar clothes, we're singing similar songs, we have similar sense of humor, we laugh to the same jokes, we hate the same enemies. And this all makes us one group. That expressing all those cues sends the message, I'm one of us. There are some traditions in our group. And if you break those traditions, you're not one of us, right? You need to know our inner code. And when you may be not aware that you're sending a wrong signal, or you may be aware of that, but you do it anyway, or maybe by mistake or by an accident or whatever reason, or because you really want to do something which is wrong. So you're doing you make some transgression, right? And then it means that you didn't send the right patriotic message. You actually can be considered a message, I'm not one of us. And then you need to send messages of remedy. And messages of remedy are extremely interesting. You're sending messages that, no, I'm still one of us. And depending on the situation, those messages would be quite different and would correspond to different emotions. For example, if nobody saw your transgression, the best strategy might be just to keep it in secret.
Can you give an example, like what are some transgression signals and what are some remedy signals?
No, assume that you were very hungry and you stole somebody's sandwich in school, right?
In school, okay.
If nobody saw it, you might believe that it's good not to tell anybody. So you keep it in secret. It doesn't sound like a message, right? I don't tell anything to anybody. But most of the time, the fact that you keep something in secret is pretty obvious. We don't know what you keep in secret, but your behavior is secretive. So
shady, sketchy.
And the question is, what emotion could be associated with this message of secrecy? And my interpretation is that it's an emotion of shame. There are so many different approaches to shame, I know, but if you look at what Freud was talking about shame, that when we're ashamed of something, we suppress this information, we don't tell it to anybody, and eventually we suppress it from ourselves, and it becomes unconscious, and so on. So that's the meaning in which I use this word. So shame is a message, actually a no message or a message of secrecy. But then assume that you were discovered, right?
Stealing
everything
sandwich.
hidden becomes whatever the expression is.
Becomes known or comes into the light. Everything in the dark comes into the light. Yeah.
Something like that,
Something
right?
like that.
So if you are discovered, then you need to send another message. And that message would be something like, yes, I did it, and it was wrong. I know it was wrong. I would never do it again. And this is a message of remorse. That's a message of remorse, and it works. You can avoid punishment or reduce punishment just by admitting that your remorse. And sometimes people would do it preventively, like you have a feeling that discovery is imminent. So you would probably benefit from stepping forward and telling people that what you did and that you regret it. And before you're discovered, that gives you additional credit, right? Or assume that what you did was obvious for everybody. You did it in public, so you can't hide it. And in this case, you would feel embarrassed. And the message of embarrassment is, don't judge me by that. It was an accident. I usually don't
do
who I am. It's not what I am, right? So you see, this simple analysis of group dynamics would immediately produces very important and interesting emotions, which are simple messages and absolutely necessary messages in this situation.
And so in the group dynamic, let's say you show up in the morning in first period in class, there's a group of 20 kids all sitting at their desks, there's a teacher, and everyone says hello to the teacher in a certain way. Let's say, hi, Mr. Johnson. And you come in late, right? So you come in late, tardy, and you forget to say, hi, Mr. Johnson. And then he's going around taking attendance and he goes, John, Jessica, and he comes to you, Valéry, and you say, oh, hey, Mr. Johnson, sorry, I forgot to say hi to you. How's your morning going? And apologies for being late, right? So the message there is, I know that I did something against the code, right? I'm at least, if not embarrassed by it, I'm acknowledging it. So there's a public acknowledgement because we all saw it. And then and there's an apology, right? And in that way, there's remorse. So when you skip those steps, so when you come late to your job, or you come late to a Zoom call, or you arrive at a conference, an important conference for work, and you're disorganized and unprepared, if you acknowledge it, that's one thing, and things are copacetic. There shouldn't be too many interpersonal issues. I mean, if it's repetitive, sure. But when you come late, or you don't perform, or you aren't prepared, and you don't acknowledge it, then of course the person who's supposed to control your work, the boss or the people paying you, are, well, he's not remorseful. He's not hiding it. He's doing it openly. So he's
So he will
disrespecting
do
us.
it again.
So he'll do it again. So we either have to punish him, or what else?
Whatever. Punish him, fire him, not deal
Fire
with
him.
depending on the situation. But yes, you need to reject him, not respecting the rules of the group. Correct.
And by the way, in Miami, if that same company were in Miami, coming on time would probably be disrespecting the group. It's all about the norms. I mean, in Miami, it's 30 minutes at least, right? In New York, it's about 3 minutes. In my experience, would be okay, but no longer, maybe 7. And so if you don't acknowledge the norms that you've broken, then of course there's going to be conflict.
It's like non-drinking in Russia.
It's like not drinking in Russia. It's like you're in college in the US and everyone's going out and you're studying, right? If you're with a group of people who like to go out, that's what you do every week, and everyone looks at you and say, hey, Alex, you're not coming out tonight? Well, yeah, guys, I need to study. I've got this exam. I'd love to be there. It sounds really fun. That's one way to say, okay, I respect your norms. I respect what you're doing. I want to be part of your group. But if I say, and I've been this guy before, I say, well, you guys go out too much. Drinking's not good for you. It's going to keep you up in the morning. You're not going to study well. Like, I think you guys are dumbasses for going out so much. And then they're like, oh, well, he's not identifying with our norms, right? You can either put him as an outsider, so kick him out. We can punish him, mock him, make fun of him, nerd, not cool. Or we can say, well, that's fine. We still love you, And so there's a few different reactions that can be had to a non-belonging message, right? But it's all about the context, tone of voice, and the message you're ultimately sending, whether it's one of shame, guilt, pushback, anger. And I think just it's simple, but I work with some of your patients or clients on health coaching, and sometimes they have to have a tough conversation with their spouse about, hey, we can't keep eating pasta because my A1C levels, my levels of blood sugar are just going up too high. My health coach say we need to stop that. But there's different ways to say it. One way to say it is, I make all the money in this house and therefore I decide what we eat. Right? That's it's the same message. Another way to say it is, wouldn't it be awesome if we both lost 20 pounds and we could get back to tennis? It seems like, from what my health coach is saying, that pasta is kind of our Achilles heel. What if we tried the zucchini pasta? Would that be crazy? Or a third way to say it is, hey, do you want to give up pasta? Those are all the same messages, more or less, with some perturbations, it changes, but said differently. And I think it's simple, but by orienting to this clear model of communication of context, message, and mindfulness of nonverbal cues and of roles, and we should get into roles as well, as we're about to, you can get a lot more simple. And so I definitely hear your voice in my head at times, when I'm like, okay, wait, why is this person getting angry at me? Oh, I didn't give them the proper acknowledgement, or I didn't respect where they're at, So we touched on interpersonal dynamics, kind of one-on-one. We touched on one-on family a little bit. We touched on in the group, right? So belonging. What about between groups?
Oh, between groups is an interesting thing, because as long as you talk about communication between groups, not inside the group, the size of the group is immaterial. It may be a group of 1,000 people, millions of people, or it may be the group of one person. You won't call it a group, but mathematicians would call it a set of one person, right? So the intergroup dynamics and interpersonal dynamics are practically identical when we talk about nonverbal communication. Yes, when you don't show the appropriate respect, you break the rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
And between two groups or between two people, there are many, many different types of relationship. But the most interesting probably is a collaborative relationship when people should do something together, and there's a question of organizing these behaviors, right? Which typically is done through some kind of authority. Somebody makes decisions and somebody does what they're told. Somebody does what they're told. And this is about power. If I am more powerful than you and I will make decisions for you, I will benefit from them because those decisions would include increase my access to food and sex and all other things which are important in life. However, it comes with a cost. Making decisions for you means that I have to making decisions is a work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, I need to, even if I'm stronger than you, you might still feel rebellious, and I need to suppress those rebellion. So it comes with all kinds of costs. So eventually, there is some cost-benefit equilibrium. I will make decisions for you, like 50% of your decisions will be mine, others will be yours, or 30 or 90, depending on the power balance. So it is always a spectrum where the boss makes decisions, for example, about what you do at work, but not about who you
Oh.
date, right? And the mother with totalitarian power might actually control who you date and what you do. So there are different types of power balance, and there are a lot of ways to establish and maintain and change these dynamics. For example, if I'm your boss, I control some part of your life, but not all your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I need to, you need to send me messages that you respect me as authority. I need to send you messages that confirm that I'm your boss.
Mm-hmm.
Those messages of authority, which are typically sent through a very strange set of actions. If you look at the nonverbal behaviors of people in authority,
Mm-hmm.
you will realize, at least I realized, that all the messages they send are messages of not being afraid of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I keep open posture because I'm not afraid that you will attack me. I can show you my soft belly without any risk. And I will speak slowly because it doesn't even come to my mind that you can interrupt me because I'm the boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all this kinds of behavior are actually telling you, you are not a danger for me. I don't perceive you a danger. And if you take this message, you think, oh, okay, if he doesn't perceive me a danger, maybe it's better not to attack him. He probably has a reason not to perceive me as a danger. So that's how you establish authority and maintain authority through those kinds of behavior. And if you decided to change the balance, for example, I want to start controlling your dress code. You were wearing whatever you wanted, but now I decide to control your dress code. Non-verbally, I can just tell you, okay, from tomorrow, Alex, you will have to come in the suit. But I can punish you for not coming in the suit, as if you were supposed to know that, right? So I pretend that I am angry. I pretend that that you violated the rules, whereas I actually was the one who changed the rules. And your response would be either, if you feel strong enough, you will try to keep the balance, you will try to fight back. If you're not feeling strong enough, then you will submit. And submitting would require you to do something to placate me, because I am angry, right? You broke the rules of which you were not aware. So I fake my anger, and you will fake your remorse.
Mm.
And
the whole message of fake anger and fake remorse is
guilt. Guilt is different from remorse, because remorse, when you feel remorseful, there was something wrong you did and you regret it.
Mm-hmm.
Guilt looks similarly, but there is no misdeed, not necessarily any misdeed. The message of guilt is stop punishing me, stop teaching me a lesson. I already know what I did wrong. I won't do it again. What did you do wrong? I need to think about it. I have no idea. But I show through behavior, I pretend to be remorseful to placate the aggressor. So that's very counterintuitive, but feeling guilty and being guilty have nothing to do to each other. You may do nothing wrong and feel guilty, and you can do a lot of wrong things and rationalize it away. And people can rationalize away everything, theft and murder and the Holocaust. Everything can be, and you won't feel guilty unless there is some responsibility for your actions. Then you will feel remorseful. But when you feel guilty, you don't have to do anything wrong. The most guilt-ridden populations are abused children and battered women who do nothing wrong, but they're always need to placate an aggressor.
Skittish. Yeah,
right?
skittish. Like,
so, yeah, and full of guilt. People come to me full of guilt and they immediately expect some kind of abuse.
And well, we can touch on like creating a safe space for folks in therapy and allowing them to reprocess certain situations with more comfort and more power. But ultimately, it's a great example of guilt, not deserved guilt, right? When it's the Stockholm syndrome, you have somebody who's abused as a child, and yet they're still trying to tell their aggressor, "Hey, don't hit me. Hey, don't yell at me. Oh, you're right. I screwed up. I'm so sorry." But ultimately, they actually didn't screw up. They're just being attacked, right?
It's actually what you described. It's still guilt. When you say, "Don't touch me, though, don't hit me, whatever. I am good," it's guilt. Stockholm syndrome comes when the power of the person of authority is overwhelming, and just guilt is not enough to placate them. Then you will start worshiping them. One of the examples of overwhelming power in people's perception is God. And you worship God. You don't feel guilty. You worship. Of course, guilt is a part of any religion. And the Catholic start their day with mea culpa on their knees. But worshiping is actually the sign of Stockholm syndromes. When the abusive father dies and the son visits its cemetery every day and builds a shrine at his home, it's a sign of being abused. It's not love, it's worship. And worship is almost inevitably comes from abuse, from like serious abuse, from overwhelming power.
And so just going back for a moment before we come back to, as we keep fleshing out guilt, because I think we've touched on anger quite a bit, and we've touched on anxiety in some ways and ambiguity. With the boss-employee relationship, I always find so illustrative, probably because I don't respond well to authority. And finally, when this clicked and I said, oh, it's just a role. I'm wearing the employee hat. They're wearing the boss hat. Doesn't diminish me as a person or mean that they can control everything in my life. I found a lot of peace with it. And when it comes to boss employee, so there's no set rule that you need to wear a suit and shave, right? It's not set. It's not in the handbook. It's never been discussed. But when you come to work and you're wearing a t-shirt and you're a little unshaven, the boss says to you, well, you look nice today. And immediately your response could be one of two things. Thanks. Yeah, I'm more comfortable this way. Or what you expect is, oh yeah, I'm sorry, it was a rough night. My car broke down. Normally I'm going to show up much more presentable. But you're actually apologizing for a transgression that didn't really occur. I mean, it was a norm maybe, but it wasn't explicit and it wasn't even implicit necessarily. So
explicit norms only apply to verbal communication. All non-verbal communication is explicit, right? You can't explain anybody what the norms are. You can only punish them for not following it. Right?
Interesting. So, but I guess you can never read what's in somebody's head. So the boss isn't really right to punish the guy for showing up in a t-shirt unshaven.
The boss is right, because if the boss cannot speak, if the boss is a dog, that's the only way he can deliver the message.
And the message being aggression, right? Like you're challenging my authority because I'm the leader of this group. I've set the norms this way. And
You're right.
I'm going to mock you publicly for your t-shirt and thing. And if you don't koto, and if you don't bob your head and say, oh, I had a rough night, my car broke down, and you say, oh yeah, well, I'm really comfortable this way, then the
But if you
boss's
can't
position is
talk, you
challenged.
cannot do it, right? If you cannot talk, you can't explain anything. So your only recipe for success is to look around, see what other people or other dogs do, and try to follow the suit. And if you're punished, you try to figure out what I did wrong by comparing your behavior to behavior of the others. That's how you learn the norms, by copying, by mirroring. Mirroring is a sign, is a patriotic message. I'm one of us.
The group membership sign. I think, right, you come into a new situation, you like a new job, day one, you try to wear a suit and everyone else is wearing a dress shirt and slacks, but you're wearing a suit, or you wear a dress and everyone else is wearing jeans and t-shirt. Well, the next day you're not going to wear the dress, I can tell you that much. You know, you're going to show
Yeah,
up in a
because you
jeans
will
and
feel
t-shirt.
bad.
Yeah.
You will feel uncomfortable, and that's because you realize that you're breaking some tradition or some non-spoken rule, some
And no one
non-written.
would say it to you. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. It would probably never ever be said. It would be expected that you self-correct. And I think eventually if you don't self-correct, you continue to wear the dress, or you continue to show up meetings right on time when everyone shows up late, or you continue to send emails to the client a day later when everyone else sends them an hour later. You'll be out. Whether the reason for your eviction or firing is one or another, you'll be out. And I definitely know someone who had a colleague, a coworker who was then promoted to be their boss, but the person I'm talking about still treated the person who became their boss as a coworker. And that was the wrong message, right? Because when now the boss has to manage, like that's all it is. It's when you have to say, okay, this is the context here. Or even in a health coach client relationship where I'm telling someone, hey, like it'd be really good if you walk to work instead of driving. It's only a 10-minute walk, but I can't say you must walk to work or else we're not going to see you next week. That's not a supportive coaching relationship. The client will leave, you know? So I need to put my hat on and say, well, I'm the coach. I'm not this person's friend, father, brother, partner, spouse, none of it. I'm their coach. So I need to encourage them. And I've had clients where I push them too hard and try to like almost guilt them into doing things, or, you know, whatever persuasion tactics I use. And if I forget my hat and I forget that I'm a coach and I try to be like a father figure to them or a brother, it immediately results in friction, you know?
Yeah, you touched on a very important topic of social roles.
Hmm.
When you say hats, I call it social roles,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the same
Sure.
thing, obviously. And social roles are a brilliant invention, which
Mm-hmm.
was probably made by our ape
Mm-hmm.
predecessors, but humans refined it very much. And what it is actually, when we are in a situation, we need to know what to expect. That is the main function of our brain, to try to predict what might happen, to prepare us for that so that we can react appropriately. Knowing what to expect is extremely important. Not knowing what to expect causes a lot of anxiety. But how do we know what to expect in any situation? And that's where social roles come to help. Social role is actually a set of expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So if I know what social roles are in a situation, I know the expectation. Simple example: two people meet
Mm-hmm.
in the room. One of them is a student, another one is a professor.
Mm-hmm.
The moment I said those words, everybody already knows what professor expects from the student, what the student expects from the professor, what the student believes the professor expects from him or her, what the professor believes the student expects of them. So a whole bunch of expectations is already available to you just because you used the labels for social roles. The same two people meet a few hours later. The student is actually a police officer who takes classes in the university, and the professor is speeding. The police officer stops him, and the same two people have a totally different set of expectations of each other because of their different roles. And by the end of the day, the same two people meet at the party, at the birthday party of a common friend. And again, they engage in a conversation or any kind of communication with a totally different set of expectations. So the social roles allow us not only to know what to expect in a situation, they allow us to change dynamically so that we can be many things to many people. Like for my children, I am a father, and this is a role which comes with expectations and with mutual expectations. However, sometimes we interact as friends, and sometimes we interact as a teacher and a student, depending on. And it's always, it should be very explicit what we are doing now, what our roles are. If this is not present, you can only have one role with another person. Many people tell me you cannot do therapy with your friends, or you cannot do therapy with with family members. It might be difficult. That's just changing the role might be difficult. But with friends, sometimes it's possible if we are very well aware of what we are doing right now. We can be friends and you can be my boss. Is it possible? Yes, it is, if we never mix these roles. Because the moment you mix roles, the expectations become undefined and not clear, and it causes to all kinds of confusions. But if we keep the roles straight, there was this nice example about the student and the professor example again. The professor has a lot of power on the student and the audience. The student had a lot of power upon the professor on the road. And none of them had any power upon each other in the party.
Right. And I think that hierarchical perspective on social roles is really key. And sometimes people don't like to think about hierarchy, or it annoys them, or they feel less than, especially someone who's really bright, young, entrepreneurial, and starts working at a company where they don't feel respected. Their ideas don't feel right. And they rebel, and they show up late, and they talk out of turn. And I'm just really talking about myself here, but if they would just if they would just realize, like, hey, you might be everything you just said, like a bright guy, a young guy, a high achiever, but in this company, in this social room, so to speak, in this container, you have a boss and you are subsidiary to that boss. And
the expectations are well defined.
And they're very clear. And it was so eye-opening for me. And I think everyone out there who's struggling with a situation in their personal life or their professional life, or even in their mental life, really, like when the dad did something to you when you're a kid, or left, or didn't fulfill a role, or vice versa, somebody stepped in and fulfilled a role, but you don't exactly know how to put them. Well, think about really what set of expectations are they following? And, so if somebody came into your life like a stepdad and they pretty much fulfilled the role of dad, if you put the dad hat on them, does their behavior now make more sense? And just going back, and we'll have to do another one of these, but going back to when your parent is sick, or your parent's not, doing well, and you see that they're heading for a bad path. And as the child, you say, hey, I really want you to change. I want you to be healthy. I want you to be around for longer. And the parent, of course, if they're wearing the mom hat, they say, well, you are my child. You have no right to tell me what to do. I'm like self-sufficient. I know what's best for me. I'm an adult. You're a kid. You've only been on this earth for this many years. I mean, we've all had this a lot of people out there have had this conversation with their parents or older people in their family. How can what role would allow for a child and a parent to have a reasonable dialogue around health?
It's a tough question.
It
I
is.
don't know the answer. The parent-child relationship is different from many other relationships because it has a history which goes very deep into childhood. And it is often happens that, well, we are conditioned for many years that parents are here to protect us, not the other way around. And then when parents need our help, it doesn't come to us that they need our help. We just don't think about it. If we're told about that, we will be glad to do what they need. But we just don't think that they may need our help because it never happened before. Because it's not, Yes,
Go
and
ahead.
there are many things which are a little bit weird about this relationship as compared to other relationships. There's much less mutuality in it, much less. If there is a lot of mutuality in it, it's a non-healthy relationship. It's a
Mm.
role reversal. Well, a child has to take care of their parents. It's a role reversal and it doesn't seem to be healthy. Usually, people who survived that have a lot of issues with their psychological well-being.
And so in the child-parent relationship, which you've described in the past as parasitical, and in a sense, the child is powerless, right? When at least below a certain age, depending on the cultural context and stuff. I mean, the child needs the parent, and that's why the baby cries and you feel bad, unless you're a psychopath, right? So that changes though over time when the child becomes an adult, is no longer dependent, and the only way I see to flip the script. I mean, because when people do get elderly, the child does take care of the parent, and that's understood, right? And there's 8 billion people in the world, and this story has played out over, the last 40,000 years that we've been Homo sapiens. So it's not that there isn't an answer. It is a tough question because eventually the parent often does depend on the child, but it's that transition phase where I think there's a room for, there's room for an off ramp for health, for behavior, for different changes, and it is really tough. You probably see it in your practice when a elderly parent, needs to move in with a child or move closer or give up some independence. And I guess it's easy to say, well, you're now dependent on me because you're infirm or you're getting infirm. That conversation is probably not fun, but at least it's a little more clear. But somewhere in the middle, which says, hey, you've got 20 years, you've got 20 good years left, but it could be 30 if you do a few different changes. That's tough because it reminds somebody maybe of losing control, of changing roles that they didn't think about. I don't know. It is tricky, but it's something I'd like to really unlock for
You
people
know,
out there.
it is tricky, but I don't think it's impossible, and that's what I mean. Remember, I told you that it's not what we say, but how we say it what matters.
Hmm.
It matters much more because unless we have emotional contact, no other communication is possible, right? So you need to find the right way to deliver your message. And that reminds me back in the USSR, in the seminars in our theoretical department, people were actually extremely rude to each other. This is wrong. You don't understand. All this kind of stuff, which in America, I believe that if somebody will start using this kind of language, many people will have heart attacks. But in Russia, it was just normal way people talked. And I didn't like it. So I created a dictionary. I wrote all the expressions they used, which I considered insulting, or rude, and a translation, a different way to say the same thing, which would sound much nicer. For
Hmm.
example, instead of "you're such an idiot, you don't understand the word I'm saying," you can say, "it looks like I was not very clear explaining this issue." Or
Right.
instead of saying "you're wrong, it's a nonsense," you can say, "I'm not sure I understood what you said."
Hmm.
And there are a long list of those things. And then I looked at this list, and what I realized was that everything on the left started with a U, and
Mm.
everything on the right started with an I.
And that's the
So when
difference
you
between.
tell another person that what they're doing is wrong, you attack them. But if you tell them that you are uncomfortable because of your history, because of your idiosyncrasies, that it's your problem, not theirs, are not feel attacked, and that may be the same message.
And it goes
Also,
back to
instead of
sending the
telling
same message.
people we will do this, you can say, "What do you think about doing this? Do you think it makes sense?" And the difference is that you are formally inviting the other person to be a part of decision making, even if it is not the case.
Right. And
For
even if it's
example,
understood that it's not the case.
even if they understood that's not the case, this nonverbal message of respect goes a long way and makes people feel different. Remember this example with the movie. When I tell you we're not going, I'm telling you what
Hmm.
we're doing. When I
Hmm.
tell you, do you mind if we go some other day, I formally invite you to be a part of the decision. Although no sane person will ever say, I insist that we
Yeah.
go tonight, right? So the message is the same and you have no power, but there is a perception of having this power, and it makes you feel totally different. So yes, you can find a way to address anybody with any message if you do it respectfully, if you find the right way to do it.
Right. Context, right. Roles, right. Setting expectations, right. Tone, right. Expression. Right. I think that's, we need to pick up the cultural differences between expression in a different episode. And I think that's an amazing place to stop for today, if you don't mind. I think we got to the core of it, because when it comes to your parent that you're trying to help them get healthier, or your spouse that you're trying to change some dynamic, or you're at work and you don't like the way things are, there's ways to say things. There's ways to get the same message across.
Exactly. Yeah. Where you can tell your parent, you're so fat, you need to lose weight, and that would be insulting.
Sure.
You can tell your parent, I read this interesting paper about how people lose weight doing this, this, and that. What do you think about it? I wonder what your opinion is about it. And you show respect.
Mm-hmm.
And the message is more or less the same.
Right. And what's crazy is the person knows that you're sending the same message. I mean,
right. But
they know that you think that, they need to lose weight. And so it's something that comes down to respect, which is so primal and probably so frustrating for people in the West. We're so advanced as a society. We can communicate instantly through video. We can have this video transcribed instantly and analyzed by an AI and transmitted all around the world. But still, if we want to say something, we have to watch our tone and think about the other person's context, the hat they're wearing, the hat they think they're wearing. It's like, what makes us human?
Would be your child tells you something which you don't like and you didn't know how to react. And 2 days later, you can come to the child and say something that, what you said was wrong. Or you can come to the child and say, you said something 2 days ago and I couldn't think about anything else. You see how much respect you show by this message.
Yeah, it's different. And I think what you're touching on in Russia is that people don't give they don't care for the power dynamic there, or rather they do sometimes, and they'll tell you exactly what's what, no matter your role or your expectation.
No, I don't think so. I think it's more like even linguistic issue. In America, a policeman would tell the guy he arrested, follow me, please. And this please has nothing to do with being polite. It's just you can say it differently. The language requires it. In Russia, it doesn't.
Is it the linguistic issue? But I guess the cross-cultural dynamics are super interesting.
Very much, but probably beyond our topic tonight.
Beyond our topic tonight, but Valéry Fradkov, thank you so much for coming on, helping us make health simple, make communication simple, and for enlightening us in a lot of different ways. One of the most important topics fundamentally touching our lives. With that said, if people want to read more about you, learn more about you, contact you, where can they find you on the internet?
I have a website, therapy.fradkov.com. And thanks for having me. It was a pleasure and an honor.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And we'll have to do an episode 2. All right, folks, that is my conversation with Dr. Valéry Fradkov. I hope you immediately took away some hacks, tricks, models, and ideas on how to improve your relationships, how to communicate better in your personal life, at work, how to understand why people act the way they do, and how to really just see the world as a smoother, easier place to communicate, get what you want, fulfill your mission, and feel good and feel confident. With all that, I really appreciate if you go ahead and share with somebody who could benefit from such a tactical, clear, cogent way of communicating. And if you can rate, subscribe, and review this podcast, that really helps me spread the word, get more people listening, and help me fulfill my mission of helping others to live a healthier life. Thanks for taking a green pill. Until next time.